Welcome, everyone. We will get started in 1 minute. All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar. If you are here to hear about research trends in community composting and technology, you are in the right place, so welcome. I'm Brenda Platt. I'll be your host for the beginning of this webinar today. I direct the Composting for Community initiative at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and we're very pleased to host this event with the Community Composter Coalition. The coalition is a network of community composters that is building the movement by connecting early adopters. We're spreading lessons learned, and we're hoping to inspire new operations. If you're a community composter and you're running an active site, enterprise, or program, local government, nonprofit, for-profit, please consider joining the coalition. More information is at ilsr.org/composting. As the next slide shows, we're tracking the growth of community composters on many ways. One of these is on this Composting for Community map, and you can select bike hauler or schools and see who's listed. You know, the next slide just shows if you do select bike haulers, I think we have more than 24 now around the country. We also have at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance a lot of resources that we're offering. These are just some of them. Community composting done right is a guide to best management practices. And we did a few years ago this guide to community composting, growing local fertility. We've been doing a series of webinars on on-farm composting and webinars on equipment and other resources to help small size community composters. We have a podcast, we have an online certificate program, we're doing signage for your sites. We offer some templates there. So if you're one of these sites and you would like to take advantage of some of our resources, please don't hesitate to contact us. And then last thing I'll just say, we just launched just last week a census of community composters, and we hope many of you will participate in that. And the goal of that is to track the nature and growth of the sector and identify key challenges and help support you and what you all are doing. But without further ado, let me do some housekeeping before I hand things over to Shasti and his colleague Zooey. And that is, everyone is in listen only mode, as you might have noticed. We will be using if you have questions, please use the Q&A box. Click on that to enter your questions. The chat is off for now, but during the discussion, we will turn the chat on. And yes, there will be a recording of this webinar made available. Give us some time to get that loaded. And we will also make a PDF copy of the slide deck. So without further ado, the mic is yours, Shasti. And unmute so we can hear you.
Voila, great. Wonderful. So thank you all for joining us in this afternoon. My name is Shasti. I'll do a quick brief intro and then sort of dive into the research findings. And I just wanted to thank Brenda and the ILSR crew for sponsoring this event. So I just want to take a quick step back on discussing why the value of data and its importance in terms of data analytics. So essentially we have 60 years left to grow food on arable land. Soil is degrading due to fertilizers or pesticides or tilling. 95% of our food is grown in soil. So essentially right now, soil is life. We get our nutrients, we get our vitamins, we get our minerals all from soil. And essentially soil health impacts our climate, impacts farmland and our personal health. So that's sort of why I started WeRadiate, and that's the company that I have right now. And our mission is to improve soil health. So one way of doing that is we have precision technology. One of our buckets is data and technology. So there's smart cars, there's smart homes. WeRadiate's developing smart sensors for compost systems to improve compost operations or performance for PFRP standards as well. So that's one bucket that we do. Background on us, if you want to talk about more about that, let's chat offline. And other buckets include advocacy, education, and sort of research. That's why we're all here. So quick background on me. I've been in the composting, waste management, recycling space for about 14 years. Started a community garden out in Brooklyn, worked for the New York City Compost Project, taught the master composting course, also then worked in government, helped establish food scrap drop-off programs, supported environmental education in public schools. So some of the photos you see here actually include a New York City compost bike tour that we usually do every year. And that includes just looking at different locations across New York City on bicycle to see waste reduction themes. So that's sort of my background in this space, so you get an understanding of how I'm connected. So that is why we're here, right? So this is our sort of research report specifically for community composters. It is geared towards community composters, compost operators, and also equipment manufacturers or individuals selling in the agriculture space. One of my hopes with this research report is actually to create meaningful insight that maybe can create actionable change to support community composters. So that is the reason for today's session. So let's start, let's do it. So a little quick background on how we created these insights and trends. So essentially it's a qualitative research platform that we use. It's called Focus Group It. It's crowdsourcing insights in the composting space. Two objectives is to understand the impact, understand the challenges or opportunities that composters are facing, and then trying to figure out what innovations can take place. So we had over or close to about 100 participants taking this survey all across North America. These are recycling coordinators, these are master composters, these are farmers, these are food scrap haulers, maybe bike haulers as well. So we had individuals all across the US, and I should say North America specifically. And these are what some of the participants, they have to create a sort of a profile. So these are actual respondents who actually took the survey. We have a small worm farmer from the Adirondacks in upstate New York. We have a composting ambassador from Washington, DC. We have an individual from Massachusetts. So these are sort of some of the stakeholders that actually participated. So we asked essentially 10 questions. What comes to mind when you hear of community composting? What are some of your challenges? What trends do you see in the sector, and who are opinion leaders in this space? So we'll actually be able to discuss most of these questions today in further detail. So this is the forum itself. This is the focus group. So this is how individuals are responding. So you see here, what are introductions, composting thoughts, impact on society. So respondents are actually answering this and participants. So to avoid group bias, you're able to only see the answer after you respond. So you might see as it's scrolling, this was on challenges. So Resoil Sacramento or Gerardo or Michael, they're all answering it, and people can actually interact. So I could engage and have follow-up conversations, not only online, but also offline if this is of interest. So we're able to actually collect hundreds of data points based on individuals' sort of answers. And this is sort of what we were able to understand. This is like this is the key cool piece of information that we're sharing out today. So we're able to understand 60 unique findings and thought starters, essentially distilling into 8 overarching topics. So that's what we're hoping to sort of cover today based on all of these respondents through data analytics, through trend assessments, just through pattern recognition, we could sort of distill and understand what community composters are looking towards, or what innovation or challenges they're facing. So I think we're going to have our first question after these topics. So one of the first questions is, of these 8 topics: impact on society, opportunities, composting trends, role of tech, importance of technology, discovering technology. I think they're all on the space. What ones are most interesting to you? Which ones do you want to learn the most about?
We are getting some responses right now. I'm going to keep it open for another 10 seconds.
Wow, we have a lot of challenges and opportunities. And I didn't introduce Zui, but Zui is part of the team for WeRadiate. She is our head of brand. So she's essentially was able to create this beautiful deck, and she's helping us with sort of other promotional opportunities as well.
All right. Anyone excited to see the results? But okay, I'm sharing the results right now. Can everyone see it? I'm not sure, but Sashti, maybe you can talk about, yes, we see that the most excitement is around composting challenges and opportunities, with almost 50% of the people wanting to see results in that area.
Cool. Yeah, that's sort of our second topic. So we'll definitely get into that. So we'll sort of do it by structure. So impact will be first, and then challenges and opportunities will be third. And then, challenge and opportunities will be second, composting trends third. So that's sort of how we'll focus it for the next couple of, maybe next 20 minutes or so. We want to sort of, I want to be able to present for about 20 more minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Great. Zui, are you able to close the poll?
Yes, I've closed it.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Okay. So how we're going to structure this is, we're going to sort of look at a quote. This is actually a quote pulled in or survey response based on an exact sort of word for word description. And this is how we're going to sort of structure how we move throughout the next couple of 8 overarching topics. So these are what community composters think of their impact on society that they have. So the bold essentially is sort of I feel like is a good theme or good synopsis of what composters, community composters, really recognize their impact as. Essentially, it's to create a community of shared environmental stewardship. So what does that really mean? So we're going to break it down a little bit further. So one key theme that we're able to unpurse is sort of sustainability as self-care. So we're sort of mentioning that community composters are expressing a positive emotion for mental, physical, community, or health. And here, the third sort of thing is mindfulness about consumption. So about sustainability and self-care, you see these 4 different.
Ashti, sorry to interrupt you, but just be aware when you're moving your papers, it's creating a lot of noise. So that, yes.
I will move it once or twice. Thank you for that. So we'll go to sort of mindfulness about consumption. So community composters really get about just reimagining and transforming ways to reduce food waste. And all 4 of those are sort of what they recognize. We've also seen that improving immunity just by working outdoors, working in the soil, working in compost actually does create healthier outcomes. So that's sort of the first sort of, sustainability is self-care. The next one is healthier communities and control. What do we mean by that? Is essentially improving our connection with the land. And the bold one is workforce development. So community composters are actually creating local green jobs. whether it's through micro haulers, creating green businesses that are assisting in waste management. So they're actually able to support climate resiliency through this work. Sort of the last impact, it's called inquiry-based climate comprehension. So what does this mean? Hands-on learning for both students and adults. Just by working as a community composter in this space, they're actually understanding concepts of soil amendments, carbon sequestration, greenhouse gas reduction emissions, and it's sort of learning while being actionable. So that's sort of, I didn't want to talk too much about each individual one, but you could see here, you're going to be able to have the PDF, but these are the 3 sort of themes within that overarching topic. So the next one is both challenges and opportunities. So this was essentially pulled, some of the biggest challenges are raising support for community participants and also raising enough capital to be financially sustainable. Okay, so we'll get into this. So in this is specifically sort of the first paragraph under is the challenge, and underneath that, the second or third paragraphs are usually the opportunities that can support this challenge. So here, financial funding, we see that a lot. So it's really difficult to begin, maintain, or survive. And I like the quote. The quote is in red at the bottom, and it says, our biggest challenge is probably the tension between profitability, environmental impact, and issues of equity. That's really a powerful theme that I think a lot of community composters deal with. So with funding being an issue, some opportunities can be greater public-public partnerships, private-public partnerships, grant funding, fundraising options, or even financing. So we're seeing that a little bit more. There are crowdsourced campaigns like IOBY in our backyard that support environmental campaigns. You see a little bit more funding from grants as well, but this could be a really powerful opportunity to create more grant funding for community composters. Access to space. So you see that space is limited. So there's a really powerful opportunity here to change local state ordinances, rezoning specifically for composting. There could be an opportunity here for also legislative or lobbying. And you see that a little bit more. I believe ILSR and individuals in DC and Maryland are doing more, and there's a Compost Act actually in Congress. So these are lobbying good things for us as a community, for community composters as a whole. Sort of the next 2, reliable staffing. The quote I really like, it's hard to find people who both share our values and are willing to do the dirty work. So I don't want to, yeah, that's very clear. And I think an opportunity is essentially creating a long-term vision. How do you do that when individuals keep falling or going away? But having a process, having a schedule, making sure there's, there are difficult conditions, but being able to explain what you're doing clearly can be powerful. Last is sort of education. So there's going to be an opportunity to shift societal behaviors, and education is one of those key things. And on my end, I'm sorry, I just have to just close this screen and then I'm going to replay it back. So there's a need for conducting waste audits. Ongoing education and learning is very important. This could reduce business stigma. This can reduce sort of neighborhood issues. So teaching, learning, ongoing education is a necessary opportunity. Some other challenges and opportunities that we see here. So logistics and operations. So there's a demand and a difficulty for feedstock, storage, transportation of all these opportunities. So how do you pull in enough feedstock? So if anyone can sort of figure that out, that is an opportunity that's being sort of created. So an organization called Stop Checker, which Brent, many of you may know of Brent, he's actually being able to create his own career essentially by route optimization. So he's able to figure out logistics and operations, and he's been able to sort of been slowly onboarding more community composters from finding a logistical need that community composters are having difficulty with. Outreach and stakeholders. So the key to success here is essentially having more face-to-face interactions, but having key relationships. So building stakeholders, ensuring constituents across all different sectors, whether it's state, national organizations, whether it's legislative, elected officials. Partnering is important to ensure that community composting can continue to survive and grow. So the USCC does a great job. They have community composting sort of sessions at their annual event. NISAR 3, which is the New York State organization of reuse, reduce, and recycle, they have a organics council or an organic summit. So these are ways of pushing community composting into the mainstream. And lastly, nuisance. So I think this is also a real challenging issue, is how do you improve the self-image of the community? And you have to take those initial steps and day-to-day management, those that are fearful about odors and pests. So that sort of realigns with education again. How do you ensure more better educational opportunities with the public? So that's sort of a large challenges and some opportunities that hopefully can be shared and then can be developed into initiatives to create actionable plans. Cool. So the next one is composting trends. This is sort of my favorite topic. It's just, I hope a couple of you, most of you also can enjoy this. So this quote here is figuring out the importance of small scale and local solutions. So that's what community composters are desiring, creating local solutions. So what we see is some interesting trends that are developing in the space. The term is called growth of ecopreneurs, and a number of you are, I would consider, defined as an ecopreneur. So it's an ecological entrepreneur. So these are individuals, essentially you're starting businesses to solve an environmental problem. You're thinking about the whole sort of systems thinking. You're also worried about interactions between social, economic, and nature as well. And what I say here is sort of designed for sustainability. So you're thinking about product life cycles, minimizing material extraction. Can you pay a living wage to your team? So the growth of ecopreneurs, I think, is a powerful thing, and I think it's only going to continue to grow with community composters. Second is technology assisting compost. So if a couple of, the USCC conference was almost a month ago, and they had an equipment show, but a lot of that equipment was geared towards industrial facilities. There's a real opportunity for those large equipment manufacturers to actually create products for community composters. So adding new innovations with old technologies should be ongoing to assist operations. So these can include large hardware infrastructure on your site, but it also can include data collection, monitoring, apps, software as well. So there's going to be more technology to assist community composters. We hope so. That's what I see as a trend. Demand for quality, value, and health. So I really like this one here. Just like there's different flavors of coffee. Now and in the near future, there's going to be different flavors of soil, different soil amendments. So we see different soils potentially for different crops, fruits, vegetables, flowers, and feedstock. What this shows is we want different standards, and not only for the end users. So there's going to be different blends offered. Tilt soil, Rust Belt riders are sort of creating that. So these are going to be more localized opportunities and products for specific farms or end users. But there's also a need actually for the composters themselves. They want to improve their own quality. So can we minimize bioplastics from entering the stream? So being able to both create a demand for higher end quality products, but making sure your stream in the beginning is also higher too. So we see the demand just only going to grow. Carbon impact, restoration, and justice. So community composters get this. I think they get connecting with the themes of carbon impact, ecological restoration, environmental justice. Decentralization is a key theme. Kiss the Ground has a powerful connection with restorative agriculture. So community composters are understanding that what we do is positively supporting the climate, but also can have a local benefit. And I think that can only grow. And that decentralized model, I think, is consistent with community composters, and maybe that might expand to other sectors as well. Growth, participation, and growth of local solutions. So here is sort of where a number of stakeholders need to work together, and it's being done, but I think the growth of this is only going to enhance. So I put that $450 million there. So that is actually the annual waste export budget for New York City, for the Department of Sanitation in New York. Each year, New York City doesn't have a landfill, so it has to essentially transport its waste outside of the city. If community composting or compost operations can improve locally, maybe there's an opportunity for reallocating a lot of those resources locally for the New York City Compost Project, for parks, for community gardens. So that's sort of where small or medium-sized facilities or haulers can connect with municipal collections or engage with elected officials. So I think coordinating and organizing on that to enable a stronger growth direction for influencing is going to be a trend that we're seeing now, and it's only going to continue. Another example is actually LA Compost. So LA Compost is now having a public partnership with LA County and City of Los Angeles, I believe, to only expand this sort of decentralized model. Okay, so we'll sort of do another break here. And so what trends are most applicable to you?
All right, the poll is live now. Please jump in and add in your answers. All right, I'm going to shut the poll in a few seconds. Here are the results. It looks to me that most of the trends are applicable. There's like an equal mix of people wanting to see or seeing these trends being useful to them. But out of all of them, it looks like growth of eco-entrepreneurs, carbon impact restoration and justice, growth participation leading to growth local solutions had the top number of votes. But it looks like all these eventually are going to be applicable to most composters.
Thank you. That's really interesting. It's sort of a key even across all of those 5 different trends. So it's interesting to see all that. Thank you, Zui. Cool. So hopefully we'll be able to go through the next couple in about 10 minutes or so. So this is the role of technology. The next couple of slides will be specifically with sort of technology in general. So I really like this. Sustainable. What type of impact does it have on the environment from its production to its implementation? So community composters are really caring about the sustainability, which I call design for sustainability in choosing a technology. So there's sort of a tension between community composters in using gas and sort of fossil fuels to create healthy soil, right? So we really like this understanding that community composters want technology, but can there be a renewable or solar or alternative source to actually drive that specific equipment? So can it be connected to solar arrays or solar panels for ASPs or turning equipment or thermometers as well? So a push for renewable can be a really powerful opportunity. So if there's equipment manufacturers out there listening, think about trying to go more renewable. What does this mean? Equipment and multi-integration feedback loops. So can actually equipment talk to each other? Can different sort of systems work together as well? Can you have a system where it's connected to an air blower and it's based on composting data that's happening? So people are sort of wanting to see how one piece of technology can actually support another piece of equipment in the field. So that's sort of that feedback loop, working collaboratively. Software and communication. So we're seeing that a lot right now. So can we use software as a communication tool for coordinating volunteers, sending messages to customers, for social media, for graphic design, for route optimizations, for efficiencies? But community composters are specific. Can it be easy and non-cumbersome communication methods to essentially save time? And that's what they're looking for as a whole. Can it save them time in this process? Sort of lastly, efficiencies. So here's the example is Twilio has made our program more efficient because it allows us to reduce time spent on communicating with households. So purchases should be made based on saving time to improve performance. So these are some things that are coming to mind while in the role of technology for community composters. Cool. Next is the importance. So I like this quote here. Any new technology that we use has to support our mission of providing a meaningful, thoughtful, and regenerative service. So that's a pretty powerful quote of why technology should be purchased. Here is the democratization of technology. And what does that mean? Can you essentially make it accessible to users? Can it be more user-friendly? Can it be compatible with multiple devices? Can it generate reports or spreadsheets? So essentially a user-friendly app. That's the democratization of tech. I could get a little bit into it deeper, but can it convey impact? So that's why, can you have an app that's designed for community composting that conveys impact? So building in an organics infrastructure. So can technology essentially be useful to process more on a smaller footprint? Is it affordable? Is it durable? Is it portable? Is it easy to fix? These are some things that hopefully technology equipment manufacturers can understand so they could provide these services or products. Developing markets and compost use applications. So we're seeing that essentially more the sale of the end product, we're seeing more and more of that for just general end users or for public and private lands. So what I mentioned earlier is, can you create a higher quality standard? So removing contaminants is one of those important pieces. And lastly, monitoring and tracking. So we sort of mentioned this before, but other tools to monitor progress in piles, to track moisture, different types of feedstock inputs. Great, so that's one last, we have one or two more. Important factors in choosing technology. If a technology undermines the positive ecological impact of our composting operations, it would be unwelcome in our business model. So one of the key factors here is UI and UX. So what does that mean? User interface, user experience. We need to have essentially technology that looks nice and appealing. I think some community composters are hoping to get a clean, easy way to see data and information. Next is growing awareness with environmental benefits. So here it's sort of that tension between profitability and creating environmental good. Can the equipment be repaired? Can it be reused? Can it be refurbished? So balancing technology impact, fossil fuel use with sustainability is very key. And you see that trend quite often now. Making compost easier. So we'll essentially composting produce a higher quality, will improve soil health, will make management of data collection easier. So these are all sort of large encompassing themes. Technology should make composting easier for me to operate. And the cost implications. Is there a way to fund capital investment for the equipment? So this is an opportunity maybe for banks or other financial institutions, or maybe cooperatives actually be able to subsidize different compost equipment. And there is a dialogue happening right now for sort of a green cooperative, maybe nationwide or regionally. Cool. On to the last two. So these are last two slides are essentially where individuals are discovering technology, how that communication is happening specifically with community composters. So ILSR, Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we asked hopefully to sponsor this, and they did. And they have a community compost listserv. So there's a lot of information being shared on different topics and themes, and equipment and technology is one of them. So that is a great way of understanding potential equipment available. Social media, certain community composting, just on YouTube and Instagram. If you do any keyword searches, there's a whole lot, there's a strong community. A lot of people are sharing different themes of composting in general. A couple of experienced composters that people had mentioned. So James McSweeney, Brenda, Michael Martinez from LA Compost are a couple of few. There's a whole bunch on that list too. But these are sort of names that stood out. And regional associations, regional and national associations. So the US Composting Council, NYSAR, which is New York State Association for Reduce, Reuse, Recycle, the New York City Compost Project, Department of Sanitation, and even California Alliance for Community Composting. And particular magazines, Biocycle and Rodell, are really interesting ways for community composters to learn. And opinion leaders. So these are people who community composters are sort of looking up to understand more. Community organizations, this is heavy on New York State, but Big Reuse, Lower East Side Ecology Center, Botanical Gardens, LA Compost, Cornell Extension, Institute for Local Self-Reliance. James McSweeney comes up again in his book on community scale composting systems. The USCC, and even Compost Council of Canada. There's a couple of policymakers and politicians actually that are being able to push this agenda as well. It's a positive thing. And in New York City, Antonio Reynoso, who is now the Brooklyn Borough president, understands sort of organics. And sort of what I want to say with that, policymakers and politicians, is I think people want to do good. Elected officials want to do good, but they don't necessarily know how to. So guiding them, essentially holding their hands to do that, takes steps and might take a little bit longer than we would like to see, but there can be a strong benefit working collaboratively with elected officials. And just thank you for watching this. Thank you for a couple of key entities, Focus Group It Survey, NextCore, who really helped design a lot of the questions and summarize them and understand the trends. Community composters, without you, this wouldn't make sense at all. So I really appreciate that. US Composting Council for allowing me to speak recently, and then Institute for Local Self-Reliance and the Cultivating Community Composting for willing to sponsor the event. And I think that might, shout outs also to testimonials, just Michael from Rust Belt Writers, Meredith from Common Ground Compost, and Michael again from LA Compost. And we'll be able to send the pitch deck, so you can essentially learn more. I guess this is the last one, the last question we have here, and we're gonna go up into Q&A. So I'll head it to Zui. what are some topics you would like to learn about in the future?
Yeah, so this is the last poll, launching it now. It will just help us research further on some of these topics. So we would like to learn from you. What are you most interested in learning in the future? And here we go. I'll keep the poll on for another few seconds before revealing the results.
Great.
All right, ending poll now. Yeah, looks like we have a few clear winners here, composting challenges and opportunities and composting trends. This is really good to know. I feel that a close second is important factors in choosing technology. This is great insight for us as we keep discovering new opportunities and new learnings within this field. So hopefully we'll have more research for you in the future.
Thank you, Zui. Excellent. And I think that should be it on our end. That's essentially our contact information. So we will plan to give us some time, but we'll plan to send the PDF as well as the recording once we've posted online. So don't worry about that. This is contact information if you want to follow up with me on any of these sort of topics. But I think we should be able to open it up, and I think we could open up the chat now too. We have about 20 minutes. So I did go over a little bit, apologies for that, but I think 20 minutes is a good time for maybe Q&A.
Yes, Ashti, we have a few questions already. I can jump in and read the questions for you if you can answer them one by one. So the first question we have here is, how can we get more involved in the policy making aspect of composting or bringing a change at a community level? What's the first step that we can take?
That's really good. Just personal experience when I was a community composter and then worked in government. And I sort of mentioned that is elected officials want to do good, but they have trouble understanding how to do good. One way of doing this is just documenting your process, whether it's photos or data or the amount of people power, amount of people involved in an organization like community composting, the amount of material being diverted. So keeping track of that, calculating that up, and maybe getting in touch with a local official. It doesn't have to be the leader, the mayor of your town or city at the moment. It could be sort of city council members, sort of lower hanging elected officials who want to do good. And just be consistent. Maybe there's committee meetings, waste and recycling committee meetings, trying to find a like-minded team or a group of individuals that sort of can connect together and work collaboratively are sort of first steps. But take action, take action, document the process, but also get involved. You could find all their contact information probably publicly available. And there's no such thing as a phone book anymore, but it's all online. So, or just maybe meet them in their office as well. I think since COVID, maybe hopefully minimizing for the summertime.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is it possible to standardize composting to help create SOPs?
I want to know, did they say what SOPs mean?
Standard, I assume that's standard operating procedures.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's what I wanted to, not everybody knows what SOPs is, so thank you, Brenda, for explaining that. So there's standard techniques. Zui, can you repeat that question once more?
Yes. Is it possible to standardize composting to help create SOPs?
That's great. We believe so. I think people think compost is an art form, but I think it's also science that you can pursue and follow different paths. So there's actually some composters are figuring out which feedstocks can get higher rates of thermophilic composting. So that's certain research that's being figured out. What are the different ratios with different feedstock? And I think this research is only going to continue. So one idea is what feedstock could actually support different types of fruits or vegetables. So one example is roses. Roses like calcium. So where can you get calcium? Essentially from eggshells. So if you have a soil amendment specific to flowers like roses, maybe in your feedstock mix, you have a larger or higher percentage or ratio of eggshells specifically for that specific blend. So definitely you could create different standards or different soil amendments based on different feedstocks. And I think data can really be powerful for knowing when you're hitting those thermophilic operations or PFRP.
Great, thank you, Sashi.
I hope that was
Another
answering your
question
Maybe,
here.
hopefully that was good.
Yes, sorry. Yes, the next question. Did you notice scaling up as a challenge for community composters? If yes, could you please share some anecdotes?
Scaling up was a challenge for community composters, certainly. I think a lot of community composters fail, or it becomes a real struggle for both financial security and making this a career. Unlike other industries, I think community composting is too new for people to get insurance or people to get customers. But I think only with the current success rates of, let's say, Rust Belt writers, I like compost. That's a really big common ground compost. These are big homegrown wins, but the community is only growing. And I think that's where scaling up is important. So there's this talk about a cooperative model. So is there a way to maybe incentivize members of a regional cooperative to actually cost share on certain equipment or certain data purchases? So I think that scale up model can be really powerful now with multiple community composters essentially working together with purchasing power to bring down certain equipment or technologies to an affordable rate. So I think that scale up can be really powerful. And hopefully these discussions will become more publicized or make maybe these questions can help more action be done quicker, because there is talk happening about that specific aspect.
Cool. Another question here. Are there any graduate schools, degrees, themes you recommend that can be applied to compost and sustainable innovation?
Ooh.
That you would recommend?
I recommend. I'm going to bring Brenda to that. What do you think, Brenda? How should are there any graduate courses?
Oh, such a good question. I will just say, I don't know, there should be, and it's time that composting is really integrated into curriculum at all levels, I believe, or soil health, if not composting specifically. So there are probably some schools, there are a lot of land grant institutions. So those universities might be ones to look at first because they incorporate, some curriculum on soils. And I'll just say in terms of composting training, there's some great training programs and certificate programs. Not only the ones I mentioned, our online community composting certificate, but the US Composting Council. We'll put a link in the in the chat, offers professional certificates and operator's license. And then there's a new 131 degree composting school that James McSweeney, that Sashti mentioned, is offering too, which is online. So lots of opportunities to get some education and training in this space.
And maybe graduate classes, I can mention, I'm based in New York, so I know Cornell Cooperative is a really great course and sort of in Ithaca. I believe a lot of these land grant or extension types of schools like Vermont or New Hampshire or Minnesota might have really great coursework, but I'm happy to chat with you offline and figure out where or what you're trying to look into. Oh,
awesome. There are some comments in the chat as well, mentioning some schools in Florida, the Soil Food Web. So some good resources coming in the chat. Piggybacking on the previous question, Sashti, there's another question around, are there any online resources for community composters to learn from? Any websites, people that you follow? Any sort of research that you've seen on this subject that you would recommend?
So the question is about research, or is it just about information?
Any sort of online resources that could be helpful for community composters?
I think a really interesting one is the Save Our Compost or Save New York City Compost one. That is actually, there was a question about how do you start or engage. That is one specifically for New York City, but that one is really active on community organizing and connecting with elected officials. So the background on that is New York City and the mayor cut essentially funding for composting out of the budget. And it took several months of organizing and almost a year to actually implement funding back into the budget. So the new mayor actually cut funding again out of the budget. So now there's another sort of activization, community engagement to learn about this is why it's important, both environmental, social, economically. So Save Our Compost on Instagram would be really good for just organizing and understanding that. I believe LA Compost does great jobs on the West Coast on connecting with the decentralized system and working with neighbors nicely. CAC is a name out there. It's California Alliance for Community Composting. So they essentially were able to receive a Cal Recycle grant. And what that means is the grant will actually support community composting all across the state of California. So CAC could be a really interesting model for just learning how does 1 or 2 or 3 sites can actually support statewide implementation of community composting through essentially a public-public partnership. So I think CAC is slowly starting to create a site online. ILSR for sure. So Institute for Local Self-Reliance and their websites are very informative. So hopefully that's some tidbits.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Another interesting question. What are the most underused markets for compost that still have big potential that haven't been realized yet?
One that popped into my mind is vineyards. I think wineries are understanding that just for the taste of grapes. And I think that will only grow. So I think soil health and soil quality for vineyards will be a promising market to just improve that. So creating maybe specific soil blends for grapes could be interesting, but just improving soil quality across vineyards could be powerful. And that's, I don't think people are going to stop drinking wine. That could be one market. I'm trying to think of others, but maybe it'll come to me.
Actually, I would love to just add to that, that one of the fastest growing markets for compost is in green infrastructure, which is like, rooftop gardens, stormwater management, bioswales. And there's a number of states that have their Department of Transportation have developed specs for compost use, for compost blankets, to help manage prevent soil erosion and manage stormwater runoff. And that's one of the fastest growing markets. And we have one of the members of our coalition, Fertile ground compost in Oklahoma City is actually making these compost filter socks for stormwater management and earning something like $100,000 in revenue from that product. So even small sized community composters can earn significant revenue from these growing markets. And I think, you know, different blends for whether it's the vineyards, different soil blends with compost is also helping to create value-added products throughout this sector.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, I totally forgot about DOT, highways as well. So just road infrastructures. So essentially driving along highways, they would need compost to minimize erosion or for erosion control. So that's definitely a growing sector and field. Another one I was thinking about, it's blanking, but yeah, shucks, I forgot, but thank you for the DOT. And also carbon credits. I think with California now emphasizing off-gassing, I think carbon credits will also be a potential trend. So you probably, composting can obviously sequester carbon. So I think that will be a growing field in the next couple of years now to link composting practices with carbon credits and carbon sequestration.
Thank you both, Brenda and Sashti. We have 5 minutes left and we have 2 quick questions. So the first one is, what is your opinion on combining composting with vermicomposting?
It's my opinion on combining those two. You know, I'm not sure why you would combine. I'm not sure the reasons, but vermicomposting is you're creating the healthiest natural soil amendment in the world. That's what I think, by the worm's gut bacteria. And then combining it with regular composting. I'm not sure if it's just a large scale composting used with worms or actually combining the final end products together. I feel like this could be a really interesting research topic. Maybe you're growing a certain food or a certain crop, and adding both of those two different end products could be a powerful solution. So I don't think that's a negative, but I'm not sure I'm not sure. So, and it's okay.
All right. And then the final question for today. What made you make this research free and available for all?
Ooh, you know what? I think there needs to be more learning or more understanding of community composters. I think a lot of people are doing research, not necessarily sharing it. And I think that's important to share this knowledge. And also specifically with community composting, since it's a growing space. So, you know, I don't want to own it. I was just able to luckily summarize it, understand certain trends, and tweak out certain key insights. But I think having these learnings and sharing it with the community is very important for only the growth of community composters, not only here in the US, but across North America. And across the Americas, because we do this all across the world. So yeah, thank you for this opportunity, ILSR, for sharing these resources and insights to the wider public.
Great. That was the final question for the day. We have 2 minutes left if you want to wrap up. Thank you, Brenda, so much for jumping in as well.
My pleasure. It was such a pleasure to host this webinar, and the results of your research on these trends. I think it's very important, and hopefully we'll be seeing people meeting these challenges with equipment, technology, financing, and all the other things that you mentioned, Shasti. So stay tuned for more in this series that we'll be doing to support community composters. Thank you for joining today and listening.
Thank you.